Steel hulls roll forward. Canvas screens rise. Propellers begin to churn. Then the first tank disappears. Not hit, not burning, simply gone. Swallowed by gray water a few thousand yards off the Norman coast. Inside another duplex drive Sherman, a British crew hears what they later described in after-action reports as water slapping hard against the flotation screen. The sea is not calm. The English Channel on June 6, 1944, is running higher than planners hoped. Spray breaks over the canvas collar designed to keep 70-odd thousand pounds of tank afloat. The propellers fight it. The bow dips. A crewman reaches for the bilge pump controls. The driver tries to keep the nose square to the swell. The screen buckles. Within minutes, multiple tanks in that launchway vanish beneath the surface near the La Rivière sector of Gold Beach. No German shell has struck them. The battle in this sector has not yet fully begun. Pull back from the sinking hulls and look at the coastline west of Arromanches. Gold Beach was divided into sectors. How item Jig. La Rivière lay within Jig sector, opposite the assault of the British 50th Northumbrian Infantry Division. Their mission was to land, break through the coastal defenses, and link with American forces moving inland from Omaha. The armored support for the infantry came in part from the 4th/7th Royal Dragoon Guards. They were equipped with Sherman Duplex Drive tanks. The design, developed under Major General Percy Hobart's 79th Armored Division, used a collapsible canvas screen and twin propellers powered from the main engine. In theory, the tanks could be launched offshore, swim in, drop the screen, and provide immediate fire support. The concept had worked in training. But training waters are not the channel under wind and tide. On the American beaches earlier that morning, many DD tanks launched far offshore at Omaha also sank in heavy seas. Gold Beach would not suffer losses on that scale, but at La Rivière, launch distance and sea state combined in a way planners had tried to avoid. A lesser-known detail: British doctrine generally preferred launching closer to shore than the Americans did, precisely because of weather risk. Yet even there, some waves were put into the water farther out than ideal. The naval crews had their own pressures, avoiding congestion, maintaining formation, and keeping landing schedules aligned with H-hour. Two timelines now begin to move in parallel. Shortly before H-hour, landing craft tank carrying DD Shermans approached their release point off Jig sector. The intention? Launch, form up, and swim the remaining distance. Sea conditions are rough enough that several squadron leaders reconsider. Some LCT skippers choose not to launch at full distance. Others proceed. The historical record shows that at Gold, unlike Omaha, many DD tanks were ultimately landed directly onto the beach rather than fully swimming in. That decision, sometimes made at the level of individual craft commanders, would prove decisive. But near La Rivière, a number of tanks are committed to the water. The flotation screens rise roughly 7 feet above the hull when deployed. In calm conditions, that is sufficient. In rolling swells, it becomes a liability. Water builds along the canvas edge. The tank must maintain forward motion to stay stable. If it turns broadside to the waves, it risks capsizing. Reports after the landings indicate that several tanks swamped quickly. Once water poured over the screen, the weight shift was catastrophic. A Sherman weighs around 30 tons. There is no gradual sinking. There is a lurch, a drop, and then only bubbles and oil on the surface. Crew survival depended on seconds. Some crews escaped, others did not. Exact loss figures for this specific launchway vary in sources, but contemporary reports confirm multiple DD losses off this sector in the first hour. One surviving crewman later described the cold shock of the channel and the scramble to clear the tank before it pulled them under. There are no grand speeches recorded from inside those hulls. Only procedural urgency. Get out. At La Rivière, infantry from the 69th Infantry Brigade, including battalions such as the 6th and 7th Green Howards and the 5th East Yorkshire Regiment, approach the sand in assault craft. They expect armored support quickly. German defenses here included elements of the 716th Infantry Division, manning concrete strongpoints, machine gun nests, and anti-tank guns covering the exits. The strongpoint at La Rivière was designated WN-36 in German records. Without tanks firing directly into embrasures, infantry exposure increases. That is not conjecture. It is a consistent finding in British post-landing analyses. Where DD tanks arrived promptly, casualty rates dropped. Where they did not, progress slowed. At La Rivière, the initial absence of several tanks altered the tempo. Infantry had to rely on naval gunfire and their own organic weapons, PITs, Bangalore torpedoes, and concentrated small arms fire, to neutralize positions. Naval support was substantial along Gold Beach. Cruisers and destroyers engaged coastal batteries throughout the morning, but naval fire could not always suppress low-profile machine gun positions embedded in concrete. A documented human detail appears in divisional accounts. Infantry officers later noted frustration at not seeing the expected armored silhouettes through the smoke. It was not panic. It was calculation. How long until the tanks arrive? Now the timelines cross. Because here is the unexpected outcome. Despite the losses offshore, Gold Beach did not stall. Many DD tanks that were not launched into the heaviest water were instead landed directly from their LCTs onto the beach. This decision, sometimes made independently by naval commanders assessing wave height, meant that enough armor ultimately reached shore to support the assault. In fact, Gold Beach saw one of the more successful British landings on D-Day. By evening, elements of the 50th Division had advanced several miles inland and linked up with forces from Juno Beach. This complicates the narrative. The failure at La Rivière did not doom the landing. It did, however, shape the first critical hour. A common misconception is that DD tank losses were primarily due to German fire. At Omaha, most were lost to the sea. At Gold, the majority survived precisely because of flexible launch decisions. The La Rivière's sinkings were mechanical and environmental failures, not combat knockouts. After-action reports from 79th Armored Division emphasized sea state as a determining factor and reinforced the lesson. Launch distance must match conditions, not timetable. Another lesser-known point: the DD system itself was not abandoned after D-Day. It continued to be used in later operations, including river crossings in northwest Europe, where calmer waters made it more reliable. The Sherman DD was an engineering compromise. The flotation screen, supported by inflatable rubber tubes and metal struts, was vulnerable to tearing. The bilge pumps could handle minor seepage, but not sustained overtopping in rough water. Steering in waves required precise throttle control. None of this was secret. Training exercises before D-Day had already revealed vulnerability in choppy conditions. Planners mitigated risk by adjusting launch points. But June weather in the Channel was unpredictable. The invasion itself had already been delayed 24 hours because of storms. The sensory reality was unavoidable. Cold water, heavy sea, engines straining at full throttle. No romanticism, just mechanics and physics, and human judgment layered on top. There are no famous speeches tied to La Rivière's sinking tanks, no iconic photographs of a dramatic rescue. The loss exists mostly in unit diaries and appendices. A tank squadron begins the morning at full strength. By the time the ramps drop for the next wave, numbers are already reduced. Replacement crews are not waiting offshore. Every lost hull means fewer high explosive rounds available against concrete. Yet by afternoon, British infantry are pushing beyond the coastal strip. That is the paradox. A technical failure occurs in the first hour, and the operation succeeds anyway. But success does not erase the water closing over steel. How many of those tanks might have survived had launch distances been shortened uniformly? Some naval commanders made that call. Others did not. Weather assessments differed ship to ship. Could centralized authority have reduced losses? Or would tighter control have delayed the landing timetable? And deeper still, was the duplex drive concept inherently too fragile for open sea deployment? Or was it a calculated risk that paid off more often than it failed? Historians still debate degrees of responsibility, but the consensus is clear on one point. The failure at La Rivière was not the result of incompetence or cowardice. It was the collision of engineering limits and real weather. By nightfall, on June 6, 1944, Gold Beach was secure enough to begin offloading follow-on forces. The campaign in Normandy was only beginning. Off La Rivière, the Channel kept its own record. Steel hulls resting in cold water. A reminder that even the most carefully planned invasion can hinge in its first minutes on tide, wind, and the thickness of canvas. The first losses at La Rivière on the 6th of June 1944 were not inflicted by German guns. They were claimed by the Channel. Sherman Duplex Drive tanks of the 4th, 7th Royal Dragoon Guards were launched offshore to support the 50th Northumbrian Infantry Division at Gold Beach. With their canvas flotation screens raised several feet above the hull, they were designed to swim in from a calculated distance. That calculation faltered. The sea state, recorded in reports from the 79th Armoured Division, proved rough enough to swamp multiple vehicles before they ever sighted Widerstandsnest 36, held by elements of the German 716th Infantry Division. Not every commander followed the original launch plan. Some landing craft tank crews chose to close the distance and put their DD tanks directly onto the sand. Those decisions mattered. Despite early sinkings, sufficient armor reached Gold Beach to assist the infantry in breaking through coastal defenses and pushing inland by evening. The episode is sometimes reduced to a footnote in broader D-Day narratives, yet it illustrates something fundamental about the Second World War. Technology was only as reliable as the conditions and judgments surrounding its use. At La Rivière, the battle's opening hour was shaped as much by wind and water as by enemy fire.